Welcome to Soul Forum. Each episode invites you to journey across the landscape of our global collective soul. From the moment humankind entered into the story of the universe, we have sought to orient ourselves within this unfolding gift of life. Together, we continue to seek insights and language to navigate our experience of spirituality, ethics, sexuality and gender roles, civic engagement, our role in the ecosphere, and more. Your guide for each of our series are emerging scholars from around the world studying at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. The GTU is one of the world's most comprehensive centers for graduate study of religion and theology. It's a leading destination for leaders and innovators from a wide range of spiritual and philosophical perspectives to explore the world's great religions and wisdom traditions. So give yourself a moment to lean in and journey a little deeper into the human experience. Welcome to Soul Forum.
Welcome back, everyone, to this final episode on the glory of the great goddess in the Hindu tradition. My name is Pravina Rodrigues. I'm a PhD candidate at the Graduate Theological Union's Center for Dharma Studies in Berkeley, California. I major in Hindu-Christian Comparative Theology. For those who are tuning in for the first time, this is the last episode in this 4-part series in which I have introduced you to the theology of the great goddess in the Hindu tradition, called Shakta theology. I spoke about the goddess's form as one, none, and many, and how these forms reconcile diversity, including religious diversity. In today's final episode, I talk about how realization of the goddess's ultimate form as Aditi, which means unbound, infinite, and freedom, grants liberation to the Shakta devotee. So let's begin today's journey. Shakta theology holds a unitary perspective between the cosmos, the goddess, and humans. What does this mean? It means that the divine is not individually separate from the rest of reality, but it is also not totally identical to it. There is division and distinction without separation. All things, including the world and the goddess, are not two, but they are also not one. I think I've successfully confused you. Basically, what it means is that there is simultaneous difference and non-difference between the cosmos, the goddess, and humans. The great goddess and the natural world are not juxtaposed, nor is one absorbed by the other, but they are in continuous relation. Although the material world is the goddess, there is still room for transcendence. This means that the process of origination of the world does not exhaust her, nor does it cause self-annihilation of the divine being or devaluation of the world. Remember, we spoke about the default human condition, like the default language that pops up when you turn on your computer. So also our default experience as humans is that of individuated consciousness, everything that gives a person subjectivity. So liberation to a Shakta devotee, one who follows the goddess, means overcoming this natural state that cannot apprehend this absolute identity of oneself with ultimate reality. Liberation does not mean that one needs to give up the world. Remember, the goddess is part of the world, but also not fully contained by the world. So she can be enjoyed through the world and also by giving up the world. Remember, we said that in Shakta theology, all forms are forms of the goddess. The goddess is the grantor of both bhukti and mukti, which means enjoyment and liberation. She is called bhukti mukti pradayini. So you can sit in the sun and enjoy Ben and Jerry's chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream and still be saved. Remember, we also spoke about how no one is penalized for making life choices. This does not mean that there is no sense of right and wrong in Shakta theology. There is an order in the universe, and best choices are those that benefit oneself, others, and the entire universe. Remember, I also said that there is no concept of sin, savior, or Satan in Shakta theology. So wrong acts are not stigmatized, rather they are understood as coming out of a place of ignorance of one's true nature. This makes Shakta theology an all-positive framework that allows a person endless opportunities for salvation, endless life cycles to correct yourself. Indeed, you must save yourself. You must work out your own salvation. Of course, grace is present, but as Swami Satyananda Saraswati explains, the word grace in Sanskrit is krupa. Kru stands for action or doing, and pa stands for getting. So basically, it means you get what you do. If you pray and work towards your salvation, then you will be saved. Now, if choices are nothing but experiences of the many forms of the goddess, all life choices are acceptable, but they may not necessarily be beneficial for one or for others. While no life choices are condemned per se, the choice of liberation offers release from further life cycles of birth. So what is liberation for a Shakta devotee? Liberation offers release from further cycles of birth. Our human condition naturally entails mutation, divisibility, limitation, so that the direct experience of human oneness with ultimate reality is not perceived. Liberation means the apprehension of one's absolute identity with ultimate truth. Basically, it means moving from a state of duality to a state of non-duality. The experience of ultimate truth is basically overcoming ignorance. Once ignorance is dispelled, then one may attain non-dual awareness with the goddess. Ordinary experience of phenomenal reality is our default experience that is related to our limited subjective nature that is embedded in conventional reality, which is the reality of the world of name and form. This experience is part of material, cyclic world of change, consisting of life and death and all kinds of experiences. It consists of grief, sorrow, fear, while a release from the state is a state in which there is a dissolution of all these elements. A person can be in a state of liberation and still be present in the human body. So the experience of ultimate reality is the experience of the form of the goddess called Aditi. Aditi means unbound, infinite, indicating a particular experience of reality, of infinity that exists before the birth of the universe. The mystic in this state experiences a sense of an indescribable vastness that extends endlessly. Aditi grants the devotee freedom from bondage and suffering being related to the individuated and limited consciousness. Along with freedom, Aditi symbolizes motherhood. Like I said in the past few episodes, she is the divine creatrix, the source and summit of all manifested reality. She is the father, she is mother, and mysteriously she is also the son who is born to them. She is all of materiality and everything we see, touch, feel. So the big question is, how does a Shakta devotee experience this form of ultimate reality, this form of the goddess? As humans, we are bound to our ego self called ahamkara. It is the thing that gives us a sense of individuality that constricts us to localized consciousness. For example, it is what makes you like dark chocolate cake and what makes someone else like vanilla ice cream, a particular experience of subjectivity. It is directed to thinking of oneself over others. This sense of self is natural, but can also become a root of problem since along with this sense of self comes pride, self-conceit, arrogance, so on and so forth. Once this ego self is destroyed, spiritual heights can be attained. In Shakta theology, the divine is associated with boundlessness, wholeness, freedom, and light. And the evil implies limitation, separation, bondage, and darkness. Separation or limitation are mythically represented by pairs of opposites such as Sura and Asura, Daitya and Adaitya, and from the semantic pair Daitya and Danava. Don't worry about the Sanskrit, I will explain what it means. In these contrasting pairs, Sura means sun, while Asura means its dark half. Similarly, Aditi is the mother of the solar deities, while her split mirror image is Diti, mother of the Daityas or demons who represent the dark forces. Likewise, Danavas are the offspring of the demoness Danu. Danava comes from the root Dana, which means cutting off, splitting, dividing. The central expression of this dark side is the ego, which is not intrinsically evil, but its darkness arises from the fact that it is cut off, split, divided from the whole. The ego is represented by the metaphor of a buffalo demon called Mahishasura in the Devi Mahatmya, which is the central text for goddess devotees. The term Mahishasura is a combination of three words, Maha, Isha, and Asura, referring to the great lord of the demons. Here, demons should not be understood as disembodied beings or ghosts, rather the evil that resides within each one of us. This central demon has several attendants like desire, anger, greed, pride, jealousy, delusion, so on and so forth. While none of these are inherently evil, in that each of these make us fully human, they become hindrances in the way of liberation as they lead us to the exaltation of the self, of its own needs and desires. Swami Satyananda Saraswati observes 29 different asuras, dark sides of our own nature in the Devi Mahatmya. Each Sanskrit name of the asura depicts a specific aspect of our being that are described as kleshas, aspects that reside within our own self. Once the ego is slain, the other attendants, which are smaller problematic aspects of our being, are also consequently destroyed. Now, in order to kill Mahishasura, which is the buffalo demon, the goddess takes on the form of the 18th-armed Mahalakshmi, portrayed in boundless white light. The exalted ego is represented by this buffalo demon in iconography, which is considered the most stubborn animal in Asia. It needs to be subdued. The vanquished ego, on the other hand, may be represented by the devoted bull, which is a symbol of Dharma. It stands on its four legs of truth, purity, compassion, and generosity. It's beautiful, tame, docile, and determined in meditation and in service of the gods. In order to become a vehicle of the goddess, the ego must be brought to surrender. Now, humans are powerless in this respect. Only the goddess Kali can slay the ego in order to manifest the final vision of the whole. While the defeat of the demons represent aspects of desire, anger, so on and so forth, mark significant shifts in one's consciousness, the final shift takes place when the ego is destroyed so that the aspirant reaches a panoptic vision of the whole, of ultimate reality. Iconographical artwork depicts the goddess Mahakali, which is a form of the goddess, wearing a garland of chopped heads with a girdle of severed hands adorning her waist, striding naked, clasping a freshly decapitated head dripping with blood in her left hand. The chopped heads represent impure thoughts. The severed hands denote polluted acts, while the decapitated head represents the slain ego. The slain ego is depicted as dripping with the blood of attachment, because if she can attach ourselves to the ego to make us fully human, she can also detach us from it in order for us to see this ultimate vision. Since she is the ultimate doer, that is the actor, karta, she is also the holder of those acts, dharta. She can both empower acts that please her when we pray to her, and she can also disempower acts that are not in harmony with the universe. The slaying of the ego is the ultimate shift from localized consciousness to universal consciousness, a movement that is not just an epistemic shift but an embodied, experiential one. Shakta theology is more than just an epistemological or a cognitive understanding of oneself as divine. It is an embodied realization that is the opposite of a localized, individuated consciousness and inversion of the subjective self. This contemplative state is also liberative when the devotee experiences an expansion within one's consciousness so that it subsumes the whole. I liken this experience of the whole to an upside-down tree, an inverted life, or a life lived top-down. The Katha Upanishad describes an Ashwatha tree, which is a sacred fig tree planted with its roots above and its branches spread out on earth. This upside-down tree is none other than Brahman, which is a name for God in Hindu theology. The Katha Upanishad says, and I quote, "The tree of eternity has its roots above and its branches on earth below. Its pure root is Brahman, the immortal, from whom all the worlds draw their life, and whom none can transcend, for this self is supreme." Unquote. What appears to the naked eye is the universe, which is the manifested form of the goddess. However, at its root is the invisible goddess, the base of all the other worlds. The goddess's pure consciousness is the sap of this universe, which is eternal, sanatana. Pure consciousness, also called soul, is indestructible. It says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 20, and I quote, "This self or soul is not born, nor does it ever die, nor having come to be, shall it again cease to be. This unborn, eternal, everlasting, primordial self or soul is not slain when the body is slain." Unquote. Again in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, and I quote, "Weapons do not cleave this self or soul. Fire does not burn this. Water does not wet this. The wind does not dry it. This self or soul is uncuttable. It is unburnable, unwettable, and undryable. This everlasting soul is eternal, omnipresent, stable, unmoving. This is called unmanifest, unthinkable, unchangeable. Hence, knowing this, thus you should not grieve." Unquote. The nature of the sap of the upside-down tree is permanent eternality. Krishna makes reference to the Ashwatha tree from the Katha Upanishad in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, and I quote, "The Supreme Divine Personality said, 'They speak of an eternal Ashwatha tree with its roots above and branches below. Its leaves are the Vedic hymns, and one who knows the secret of this tree is the knower of the Vedas." Unquote. While the knowledge of the Vedas is Brahma Vidya, which means knowledge of Brahma or God, this knowledge is not exclusive to Hindus only. A knower of eternality is a knower of the goddess. Ashwatha also means ephemeral, thereby suggesting that the universe has qualities that are in constant motion and changing. The analogy of the upside-down tree becomes a way of explaining the transcendence of the goddess while affirming her intertwining nature with immanence. Undoubtedly, the transcendent goddess is qualitatively superior to the world, as it says in the Katha Upanishad, and I quote, "She is hidden in the heart of every creature, subtler than the subtlest, greater than the greatest." Unquote. Yet she pervades every part of the cosmos, just as every part of the tree contains the sap. To me, the upside-down tree metaphor is a way of explaining a panoramic vision of the whole. This journey to a shift in consciousness requires the fire. Again, the Katha Upanishad talks about this fire that burns out the ego and enables one to pass from fearful fragmentation to fearless fullness in the changeless whole. A journey towards wholeness is a shift from experiencing the goddess in her individuated Vyashti form to her Samashti aggregate form. In this state, localized consciousness bursts open so that an individual develops an extended sense of self in which all entities, all of reality is perceived to be non-different from oneself. This perception is an actual acquisition of a new cosmic body that can encompass the whole. Shakta theology conceives the human body as having been modeled after the goddess's own being. The great goddess holds the cosmos, including all gods and goddesses in her very being, but so also our human body. She is the container that holds all things within her, but she is also the contained within the container. The human body is essentially non-different from the goddess. This relationship of identity between the self and the great goddess reaches its culmination when an embodied realization that amounts to the confession of Saham, I am she, takes place. This is an embodied realization of one's being as universal and eternal, indestructible by death. Now you must be thinking, how does one actually get there? How does a Shakta devotee reach non-dual oneness in which one lives this upside-down tree kind of reality? So we don't have much time in this episode. However, for the sake of brevity, I will say it is through Shakta practices and through Shakta practices of worship, that is through certain rites, rituals, and visualization and the chanting of mantras, this relationship of identity with the Divine Mother is understood. Shakta theology does not aim at converting the devotee into an image or likeness of God, but to the goddess herself. To this end, one's own body is worshipped as the very figure of the goddess, containing the form, containing the energy, the power, and the impactful presence of divinity. In one of the rituals called Anganyasa, the devotee literally bends down and touches their own feet as they are the very feet of the goddess. Just as the world is the body of the goddess, which contains all plurality and diversity, diversity is invoked and experienced in the devotee's body through the chanting of sacred syllables, the performance of rites, ritualistic gestures called mudras and visualizations. In Shakta cosmology, creation is essentially divine, while all visible differences are modifications of name and form. While social conventions enable humans to structure reality by agreeing on common cultural and linguistic definitions, the universe has a completely different identification system. Each entity in creation has a natural name that contains an intrinsic movement or a vibration. Entities are named by these vibrational sounds that they emanate. These sounds, whether they are audible to us humans or not, are the natural name granted to an entity by the universe. And these are called bijas, meaning seeds, the name of an entity that is inherent to its form. Swami Satyananda Saraswati says that spiritual ideals such as wisdom and love and peace, even divinity, all have natural names granted to them by the universe. And these are known as bija mantras. These mantras are divine words of power that focus the mind on a desired vibration. For example, Fat is the bija for purity and without doubt, while Tam is the bija for laziness and anxiety. While these monosyllables may seem unintelligible in terms of literal or grammatical meanings, they are purer aspects of reality since they are uncorrupted by linguistic structures associated with words and speech. The bijas of deities are not expressions or symbols of the deity, but they are the deity themselves in phonetic forms. The proper utterance of these forms brings one into the direct presence of the deity. Bijas are phonemes that may be recited in isolation, groups, or a ritualistic context. While mantras constitute bijas, bijas rank higher than mantras and are considered closer to the absolute. The Sanskrit term mantra comes from the root man and the suffix tra, which means an instrument of thought, not of ordinary discursive thought, of course, but of an intense, effective, non-discursive one. While some Shakta mantras have a protective and a salvific kind of a goal, some are directed towards mundane ends. Bija mantras, when combined with sitting, breathing, chanting, may lead to a feeling, the attitude, the understanding, and a deeper realization of oneness with God. While mantras are of various kinds, too large to enumerate, Swami Satyananda says, the meaning, the meter, the tone, and the vibration of everything that makes the mantra a powerful instrument of liberation. A mantra whispered into a devotee's ear during initiation is doubly potent because of the infusion of life breath, prana, into it by the Guru. There are real-life stories of people being thrust into deep contemplative states upon just hearing a mantra, sometimes whispered by random strangers who walked up to them. The power of a mantra in moving the adept from gross reality to subtle reality is indeed great. While community worship includes the chanting of certain mantras and prayers, one's initiation mantra is almost always kept secret. A guru who can see through the gross physical body of the adept, the devotee, knows what vibration will be the most beneficial to his or her devotee and may even craft one for this specific purpose. The sonic nature of the mantra and its effects on the devotee can be the subject of an entire book. For now, it will suffice to say that Shakta worship includes the application of mantras in the body to achieve a body that in which revelation becomes the primary focus. This kind of body realizes that the ultimate lives within us, that the ultimate reality walks in us. May we live, walk, ultimate reality. May we be embodied by ultimate divinity. With this, I, Pravina Rodrigues, your host in this 4-part series, sign off. I'm wishing you a wonderful new year. Be well and stay safe.
Thank you for being part of Soul Forum today. We appreciate you tuning in and listening. Each episode allows you a chance to reach out to the speaker with one of your questions or insights, and I invite you to do that by just simply sending an email to soulforum@oslc.net. And we'll gather together some of the questions or insights and put together a small panel to have a live Zoom Q&A with each of our speakers throughout the series. My hope is that as you've listened to this podcast, that it can help you navigate your own soul's journey, as all of us are, in a sense, given the opportunity, really, to engage our life experience, not just through our mind and our bodies, but also through the way in which we express spirit in the world. So thanks for being a part of this journey into our common life and into the ways we give expression to our own souls in this day and age. See you next week.